Hello, my name is Graeme. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MTech, a Brighton-based AI emotions research company. I set up MTech with a mission of having some impact on the real pandemic that faces our society, that of mental illness. Over 300 million people suffer from depression, and more than 260 million in the world suffer from anxiety. It's a massive, massive impact on our society. There were more prescriptions of antidepressants last year in the UK than there are men, women and children in our society. And our behaviours are the fundamental drivers of our untimely deaths, whether that be through suboptimal behaviours in the way that we eat, lack of exercise, drugs that we take, stress in our society. So many of these are preventable, and so many of the behaviours that lead to fatal disease are driven by emotional factors. Our emotions strongly drive our behaviours. And actually our emotions drive our behaviours not just in health, but in our learning decisions, in our buying choices, in the media that we consume, and so much more. Understanding human emotion is the fundamental goal of understanding human behaviour. So how do we go about understanding emotional display and decoding that in computational terms? Well, first of all, you can't just do it from facial expression. This is the same picture labelled 3 times with 3 different emotional states on it, and clearly it doesn't make much sense without more context. If I fill in a little bit more context around the facial image, you can see that those 3 emotions make sense. In order to understand physical emotional cues, we have to understand the context that they are delivered in. So where do we find context from? Well, media is the most obvious and most computationally decodable form of context, of stimulus that we have. So I set out to understand how we can track information from context and tie that back to emotional response in order to build a data model that would allow us to decode, using artificial intelligence techniques, how humans respond emotionally. Looking at the kind of media that we want to consume, it occurred to me that we started with mass consumption of media 100 years ago with room-sized screens that we all watch together. This translated down into our lounge and a shared experience, and subsequently onto our desks, onto our laps, into our hands, even smaller in our hands, and ultimately from there the natural evolution of media consumption is onto our faces, whether that be through fully immersive experiences like virtual reality or additive experiences such as augmented reality. And so with that in mind, we set out to decode emotional response in context with virtual reality simulations. So how do we go about measuring emotional response in virtual reality? Well, we could read directly from the brain using electroencephalography, EEG, actual brain signals. This is the absolute source of information about how we respond and how we act. The problem with that is that it's an extremely weak signal. It's hardly visible at all, even in perfect conditions. When you filter that signal through hair and you add in physical movement, as in living your normal life, it's virtually unreadable. Meanwhile, we have evolved over millennia to display our emotions physically. Our facial expressions are the natural way that we express how we feel about things, as Dr. Paul Ekman said back in the 1960s, one of the pioneers in emotions research. And you can see even in newborn babies, their expressivity is absolutely phenomenal. They leave us in no doubt how they feel about anything almost from 2 weeks old. If I take the picture that I showed you previously, if I ask you which of these 2 guys is actually winning at the computer game, from the base information we don't know, but you add in the facial expression, all of a sudden it's really clear. Okay, so facial expressions, we could read those using cameras, and in fact, most of the world of emotion analysis, commercially and in research, is using cameras to track facial expressions. So that is looking at the deformity of the skin and tracking recognized points on the face in order to understand those contortions and what they might mean in terms of boxes of facial expression. When doing so, we have to bear in mind that it's not the mouth primarily that is the driver of emotional display, but the eyes. This is a heat map showing the focus of intensity that people have when they look at a face with an expression. And you see that the vast majority of attention sits on the eyes and not on the mouth. We read true emotion from the eyes. But that represents a problem for us in virtual reality because the upper face is covered. We can't see that information. And it's very dark inside a VR headset, so tracking eye movement is very difficult. And the foam of the VR headset compresses the face, making skin deformation pretty hard to read. So that led us to the third option in looking at muscle activity on the face. So EMG, electromyography, is the technique that we have primarily used for expression reading in virtual reality, which is actually looking at the electrical triggers that drive our muscle activity and using machine learning to translate that back into an understanding of meaning on the face. Putting that together, we have actually integrated our biofeedback not just with our EMG, with our electrical muscle activity, but also with heart rate information and information on head and upper body movement, together with the simulations in virtual reality to drive context and trigger emotional response, and AI to interpret all that data together into something that has meaning. And this is the MTech VR platform that we are now launching. This is it in action. The foam interface with embedded sensors is transmitting directly back to the cloud for analysis of data, but also providing insights in real time to the 3D environment. In this case, it's a Unity 3D environment, and allowing recognition of what the event or object is that is being looked at, together with an analysis of what that means. And here's a brief look at some of our analysis work, translating focus and attention in virtual reality back to emotional response. This can be mapped across entire cohorts of people to understand how large groups of people respond generally to the same stimuli. So for market research, or for emotions academic research, or for mental illness and therapeutic interventions in helping to understand how an individual responds to a trigger for their anxiety. So on that health piece, our research work over the last 4 years has had us look at a range of different conditions, all of which have strong emotional expressive symptoms, such as PTSD primarily, where we're working with the largest healthcare provider in Holland to deliver a remote therapeutic solution for post-traumatic stress disorder. Anxiety, particularly social anxiety, where we're working with a number of leading universities in developing protocols for objective measurement of anxiety response in virtual reality. And some of the work that we've done through funded research and with leading academic partners in pain, autism, and stroke management as well, for physical rehabilitation. And it's not just in health that emotion analytics can be valuable. I see the spectrum of behaviors as going all the way from the suboptimal end, where people are trying to recover from a dysfunction that they have in some form, a mental illness of some description, through people who don't have any clinical diagnosis, who want to improve their behavior and performance over time. So in simple terms in meditation and relaxation, mindfulness, being able to have objective measures of the effectiveness of these protocols as you undergo them, but also at the far end, the extreme end of performance, in being better prepared for difficult and stressful circumstances when they happen. So for frontline personnel, exposure therapy to prepare them for the trauma of combat in the armed forces, or to prepare them for the potential trauma of dealing with a car crash when first responders arrive at a motorway scene, or fire service personnel having to deal with extremely difficult and traumatic circumstances when they arrive. This preparation therapy, this exposure therapy in advance, produces better responses from healthy individuals when they're exposed to difficult situations. And you can take that back to corporate life. In presentation skills and leadership skills, these are clearly less life and death than some of the scenarios that I've just laid out, but nevertheless key performance skills that involve your stress responses and ability to handle difficult situations in the moment. By training these, you can be better at dealing with them when they happen.
I came down to Brighton today to try out a new piece of technology. It's going to help people like myself who've got facial palsy. This headset takes all the information from sensors but now translates it into real-time expressions on a 3D cartoon. Yeah, so I'm trying really hard to make her do a full smile.
Yes.
But it feels funny on my face.
Yes.
Doing it to a mirror, you kind of tell yourself what it looks like.
That's right.
Whereas she is like, oh no, that's not what it looks like.
My name's George Dale. I'm the owner of Worthing Football Club, and a lot of my day-to-day work involves using a computer, and it can often be quite time-consuming.
So by using this type of technology, this will allow you to type much faster and interact with other people. If you thought it was quite funny, you can give it an eye wink, or if you didn't like it, you can now do a frown and it'll do a frowny face. There you go.
He looks grumpy, doesn't he?
With this new headset, I should be able to control the keyboard and options using a wink or a frown, which will open up a whole new world for me.
It might sound strange to say, but for the first time since my accident, I'm able to see what my smile actually looks like.
So I've been through some of these, but use cases for virtual reality therapy with objective measurement, including public speaking and soft skills. That's been a whistle-stop overview of the work that we do at MTech, developing a new paradigm for understanding emotional response to stimuli, and our work in mental health training and simulation. If you'd like to know more, please find us at emteq.net. We also have a podcast that's starting on the general area of emotions research called The Emotion Lab. Do look out for that wherever you find your podcasts in the next couple of weeks. Or email me at Graeme, that's Graeme, at emteq.net. Thank you very much.